information and to buy tickets. This may not be Jurassic Park, but because kids of all ages love reptiles. Rep today. All right. Thank you. I'm thanking myself, Robin. It was me on that recording. I do want to see that thing, though, whatever that is, the big reptile thing. 20 minutes after 8 o'clock. Not a bad looking morning. I guess we're going to have the same old today with some afternoon rain, but nothing to worry about. Unless you're bicycling across the state. Oh, my gosh. Our next guest, Robin just told me, is bicycling from Key West to Tallahassee. He is on the phone right now, but that's not why he's on the phone. As a matter of fact, he's running for governor. Kyle Casey Gibson. He serves as a senior pastor in the African Methodist Episcopal Church. He's an educator in Broward and Indian River counties. And as I mentioned, he's a candidate for governor for the state of Florida. Good morning, Mr. Gibson. It's an honor to have you on our show.
Good morning. Thank you for having me this morning.
Where are you right now?
I'm in Fort Lauderdale. I was supposed to be in the area there in the Lake County area for an event, but I had a family emergency here.
Oh my gosh!
And so I'm still in Fort Lauderdale. So I remember that you said I could still make a call in, so I was still able to reach out and take part in this opportunity.
Okay. Well, let's make sure we use this opportunity so that you can get all the information out there that you want to. Can I start with the bicycle ride first? It's probably on the bottom of your list, but it's interesting to me. When are you going to do this?
The bike ride will start the 29th of August, which is the day after the primary. I picked that day because as running as a candidate, as an NPA candidate, the Democrats and Republicans or the other minor parties that have candidates running are vying for the party's nomination. So they're occupying most of that time space. So I think that the bike ride would kind of get caught up in the middle of the primaries. And so since I was actually challenging not necessarily an individual candidate within the Democrats or Republicans, but challenging the Democrat and Republican process, the two-party system. The day after the primaries would be the day that I would begin the bike ride, which would start off in Key West. And the bike ride will cover a minimum of 4 counties a day. And just to be clear, it's not like a tour, like a complete ride where the whole bike ride would be a whole bike ride, but it is riding about 20 miles in 2 counties. It's basically 2018. So I'll do 2018, 2018, 2018. I'll cover 2 counties, which will cover 10 miles, and then I'll cover another 10 miles, another two counties. So, covering 4 counties a day. There's a few areas in the state where I'll be able to hit like 6 or 7 counties because the counties are so close together, like around Dixie, Gilchrist, Levy. But the major part of it is to bring more awareness to bicycle trails here in the state of Florida. Because this is a warm state during the winter months. There are a lot of people that want to come here. Yes. And if we had a statewide bike trail, I think that would bring more tourism to the state. It would bring more economic dollars. And of course, it emphasizes on the physical fitness level that we want all Floridians to have.
Nice. Oh my gosh. And please be careful. The need for bicycle trails is always emphasized when we hear about a car versus bicycle start. So please be careful. I love the bicycle trails we have in our community. The old railroad tracks that are now bicycle trails are just great. They're beautiful and they're safe and so please be careful doing that. All right, let's talk about the things. If you're elected, you want to start with education?
I'll start with education. Education is dear to me. I am a 3rd-generation educator. Both my parents are educators. My stepmother is an educator. My grandmother was an educator. And so it's something, 2 of my great aunts are educators. So education is something that's vital. And it is the key element in the production of the future of our country. If we don't produce good teachers to produce good students, then our future is blim. And so we have to invest in the education of not only our instructors that are teaching, but making it possible that every student has an opportunity to succeed. And unfortunately, in the education system now, the emphasis has been on AP classes and kids going to college. However, there are so many kids that have no interest in going to college, but they're interested in a particular trade. And so under my administration, what we would do, instead of just offering scholarships for colleges, we would also offer scholarships to kids to go to trade schools, because that's equally as important. In the same way students are now have the opportunity to do dual enrollment in the community colleges and earn an associate's degree the day they graduate college, I'd like to have that same thing done when a kid walks across the stage, that they have their journeyman's license, that they have whatever their apprenticeships or whatever it is they're going towards. If they don't have that complete apprenticeship program done, there at least so much of that complete program is completed that now when they graduate, they're able to go right into the emphasis of working in their trade. And our state is really going to be suffering in a few years because we're not been emphasizing on those trades. And if we take care of those two things, it opens the door for businesses, because when other businesses look at states that they want to move to, one of the first things they look at is, what is the quality of education in that state?
Right.
And when they look at Florida and they see Florida down in the 40s, they say, why are we going to move all of our people from this state to reinvest, to come down to this state when they have this problem in education? And so they end up either going to another state or they end up staying where they are. And so once we concentrate on the education, that opens the door in so many ways to make a better state, to make us second to none, is what my platform is processing toward.
I love the way you're thinking on this one. I don't think I've ever heard anybody make that point before, and that's a really good point. Probably the best way to bring new commerce into a community is to assure that new commerce that we have highly educated people here. That I have never heard anybody say that before.
And it saves dollars. And the next question comes, well, how do you fund your education system? Well, currently our prison systems right now, they're privatizing many of the prisons, and we're spending money on inmates that really should not be incarcerated. I'm speaking of cases where drug possession charges. And I want to be clear when I say this, I'm not speaking of individuals who are selling drugs, but I'm speaking of individuals that are using drugs and caught with drug possession that are being incarcerated, spending 3 and 4 years in prison, and which we're housing at about $40,000 a year per inmate. Wow. Well, if we do not use those funds and we find a way to say, let's help rehabilitate the individual that has a problem, and the thousands upon thousands and millions of dollars that are being spent to house an inmate for a non-violent offense, if we can then use those dollars that are within the criminal justice system and revert those to the public education system, that way no taxes are being raised. And I think in the same emphasis, we're doing two things, because who wants to be known in a state where we're employing a bunch of people, but the people we're employing are prison guards or prison personnel, because we're continuing to fill our prisons up with more people. I would love to, as governor, to be able to stand before the people of Florida to say, unfortunately, because we don't have enough inmates, we have to close several prisons, versus having to say, because we don't have the money, we have to close certain schools. I think when you look at that, the latter of that is the better. Being able to not close schools, but be able to, and when I say this, it's not that I'm an anti-imprisonment person. They're individuals that deserve and need to be in our Florida prison systems. Wow. However, a person with a drug problem, if you emphasis on helping the person and that person wants to get that help and you give that person an opportunity, I think we're better fit if a person, just say with marijuana, I'm not in favor of legalizing marijuana. However, I don't think a person should be spending time in prison for possession of marijuana. Yeah. If that person is given a fine and you increase the fine every time, the first time $250, the second time $500, what happens is that fine begins to increase. That person has to really make a conscious decision. Do I really want to do this? Because this is costing me more every time. And the taxpayers are benefiting because we're getting a benefit of that person taking responsibility of paying for their crime, versus when a person is caught, when a 17, 18, 19, 20-year-old kid is caught with marijuana in the car and they're incarcerated, and then now taxpayers are spending anywhere from $35,000 to $40,000 to house them, and that's without them being sick or having any other medical problems that occur.
Right.
If you add the medical problems to it, you're talking about maybe up to close to $60,000 that we're spending for an inmate that's a nonviolent offender that really should have never been incarcerated in the first place.
One of the talking points that you sent for us to talk about is civil rights restoration. Give us some details on what that means.
Well, that's a special dear to me. I am one of the individuals in the state of Florida that had problems when he was young. At 18 years old, I was arrested, and for grand theft. It was, I attempted to cash a check that wasn't mine. I was 18, not making an excuse for it.
Right.
But I did it. I was given 2 years probation. However, I was able to terminate my probation early. During that time in 1988, the way the legislature or the cabinet had it made was, when you finished your incarceration or your sentence or whatever it was, your right to vote was automatically restored. You didn't have to go through you didn't have to go through a board, and of course that determination is given towards whichever governor is in place. So at that time, Lawton Childs was the governor of Florida, and the program he had put in place was, whenever you finish your sentencing, your rights are automatically restored. However, after he left office and Jeb Bush came in office, they began to make a change in that process where everybody that had a sentence had to now apply to get their rights back. Mm-hmm. And so it was a little less restrictive at that time when Jeb Bush came in office, because you had to physically do the paperwork instead of it being automatic. When Chris came in office, it began to change a little bit, where there was an adjustment. And then under the current governor, he changed it where you had to wait 5 to 7 years to apply to have your rights restored back. And even after waiting 5 to 7 years, depending on whatever crime you committed, you still had to come to Tallahassee and sit before the cabinet before a decision was made. And so you figure, if a person lives in South Florida, and they have to drive all the way to Tallahassee, and then what happens if the cabinet says, we deny this, you can reapply in 2 years. More than half of those people are not going to even attempt to come back. People make mistakes in life, but I don't think that has any bearing, especially if you've served your time and served your sentence. Yeah. What you're doing now is you're giving a secondary penalty. You're saying, okay, you've served 5 years that you couldn't vote already. Now you got to wait another 5 years that you can't participate. And that doesn't also just affect the right to vote, but it also affects certain licensing that you're unable to get because you don't have your constitutional rights. So we talk about people going to trades. If you're not able to get your licenses because of a conviction that you had because of a mistake you made, then you force a person not to be able to make corrective decisions, and you force a person into a position to say, hey, I have to make means of income, and there are only so many jobs available. So you almost force a person back into doing something that they maybe didn't want to do. Now you have more of a problem because now they're continuing in that system. Right. And I want to see the revolving doors by prison system really change around, where we have a very low number of individuals who are incarcerated, and the people who I would like to see incarcerated are those that are deserving, those who are violent offenders, those that really have no means of making any change and don't want to make any difference in their lives.
Right. Kyle Casey Gibson is who you're listening to. He is running for the office of governor for the state of Florida as a no party affiliation candidate, so he's not in the primaries, so you'll be voting for him in November. So keep an eye out. Let me ask you if you could give us a website or a Facebook page, something that we can learn more about your position.
To make it easy, all of my social medias are on my website. So if you go to www.kcin2018, that's KCN2018.com. If you go there, that will list all of my social media pages. It will list my vision for Florida, my reason for running. It will list some of the things I've shared with today. I've been very open with my past. On my arrest is right there on my website, so it's not something that people can say I'm trying to hide from the people. I feel that a governor should be very open, and you should know that people do make mistakes and go forth. And I just appreciate if everyone would just take the time to read my site and keep me in their prayers for November, and keep me in their prayers on my journey that starts on the 29th of August.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, absolutely, you're in our prayers for the bicycle ride. Good luck with everything, Mr. Gibson, and thank you for coming on the air to share some of this with us. If you are in the area, we'd love to have you in the studio. So I don't know when you might be here. If you're taking the bike ride through Marion County, I don't know if you will. You might.
Oh yeah. No, the bike ride will cover every single county in the state. Like I said, it'll be 4 counties per day. So I'll certainly. Well, I don't know what part of Marion, but I certainly I'll probably finish up the mapping, the particulars this week, because I need to get that printed out there for other people that want to ride and join with me when I ride along. But I certainly would love to either come back on or you at least call while I'm riding when I'm passing through Marion County.
Just please be careful. I just want to say a lot of the things you said, in fact, I think everything you said has been expressed by our listeners. So you're definitely speaking the same language as what we've been hearing from the listeners. A lot of those same things are important to the listeners, at least to talk radio. So thank you for doing this and for being on the air with us today. Good luck.
Well, thank you for reaching out to me, and I appreciate you. Have a wonderful day.
You too. We will be right back.
In the good old summertime, it takes you back, doesn't it? Makes you think and remember. What did you do in the summertime when you were a kid? At Palm Garden of Ocala, we see folks who are young at heart, but their bodies are giving them a tough time. Our goal for every guest we serve is to bring them